Hey folks, don't forget to check out the King Leper Kickstarter down below in the description box. Get yourself a signed hardback potentially. Let's talk a little bit about normies. Let me put on my wizard hat and we'll talk a little bit about normies, those dreaded normies. They're often derided in lots of circles on the internet that I interact with. People often complain about normies. They don't like normies. Normies are normal people, and I'm here to defend them and explain them a little bit, because the truth is you can't ignore normies if you want to have a commercially successful product. You have to know how to get your product in front of normal people and convince them that that is something that they ought to buy. But what is a normie? Let's look at it. I mentioned they're normal people. These are not the people who are super fanatics about things, right? Like, you might be a super fanatic about fantasy literature. If you are, you should consider getting a signed hardback of King Leper, available down below in the description box. And you meet a normal person and they like the Lord of the Rings movies. They're not going to be able to carry on a conversation with you with Book of the New Sun, and they're going to buy the fantasy books that are put in front of them. And this upsets people because the normies are not buying the stuff that's good. What's with those darn normies with their bad taste? Well, we have to understand what normal people are. I mentioned that they're really critical for the success of a commercial product. In fact, I would say that the reason that Marvel and DC went bankrupt in the 1990s is because of the direct model. What happened was taking the books out of the drugstores and the grocery stores where kids would buy them on an impulse and read them, including me. That's how I actually bought comics initially, was they were by the checkout at, Lucky Drugstore. By taking that away from normal people, away from the normies, and marketing directly to the super fans, they created this little incestuous circle that shrank until the market disappeared. The market for comic books in America disappeared because of the change of model, because it started directing its products towards fanatics and not towards the normies. So the first and most important thing that you might get with that example is normies live in the real world. They buy physical products, and digital items that are outside of their normal channels that they interact with digital products, they don't exist, right? They're not out there searching the internet for obscure, dungeon synth MP3s. They're not going to be looking for some author to buy an ebook off their website. Rather, they are going to buy the digital products that are in front of them. They're going to watch the shows that are on Netflix. And if it's not on those services, if it's not on Amazon, if the book is not on Amazon, it doesn't exist. If the movie is not on Netflix or HBO Max, it doesn't exist. Okay? They live in the real world, and the big part about living in the real world is that to them, a book is real if it's real, if they can hold it in their hands. Where they're going to see real books to buy, they're going to see them on the table at Costco. They're going to see them on the table at Barnes & Noble. This is why when you are marketing a traditionally published book, it is really important to get that book in a display case, to get it in a place where people are going to walk by and see the cover and pick up the book and maybe read it. And those little editor's choice, those little, or the bookstore workers' choices where they put things out on the table, that's actually really critical for sales, because normal people interact with the things that are in front of them. They are not searching high and low for the best product. They're just going to pick products that are in front of them that look like they're high enough quality to buy. They're not deep searchers. They're not fanatics. Okay. So if they're not on a service that they're usually going to work with as a digital product, and if they're not physically in front of them, then it doesn't exist. So, my books to most normies don't exist because they're not on the book. They're not on the book table at Costco, right? My books don't exist. They might as well not be published because normies don't see them. They don't exist. The other thing about normal people is that they are reactive, not proactive. Normies react to things. They're not proactive. They're not actively searching for something that they enjoy. Rather, they are picking up something that comes across their path that they maybe think that they will enjoy. They're not deep searchers, as I said. So the reactive, not proactive thing goes into a bunch of other things, right? They're reactive to news, which is why they get so anxious about the news, is that the news creates reactions. They react to information that people tell them. They're not out there trying to search for the truth, right? They don't have time for that. They have regular jobs that fill up their time, right? They're reactive about all of those sorts of decisions. They're reactive about what people tell them about politics. They're reactive about, just in general. They're not proactive people. They have a set way that they're doing their life, and they're not, they're not always looking for the next business opportunity. They're not looking to start a business. They're looking to have their job, and then they react when they get fired, right? I got to find a new job. Okay. They also adopt the consensus of the people around them, even when it comes to social media, right? The other thing about normies is like they're not, as part of they're not deep searchers. They're not going to know what you're doing on 4chan, right? They're not going to get memes from 4chan. They're not going to get references like that because it's not on Facebook. Okay. And they adopt the consensus of those around them. And you'll notice that people's opinions, if you pay attention and you have a lot of normie friends on Facebook or whatever, their opinions will change 180 degrees and they won't be aware of it, right? Elon Musk is like the number one liberal guy. He is really a pretty liberal guy. But now he's a literal Nazi. He's a literal Nazi because, well, the other people around them started to adopt this consensus that they perceive because they're on Facebook, right? That Elon Musk is a bad guy. So they're going to just adopt that consensus. It's a social survival mechanism, right? You don't want to put yourself at risk of losing the tribe. So you're just going to adopt the opinions of the people that are around you so that you don't get outcast. This also has to do with hierarchies and stuff like that, but you guys can think about that a lot. Normies are kind of deltas if you're thinking of like Fox Days SSH. So the delta, he's going to be really worried about what other people's opinions are and making sure that his opinions match those other people. And that's normies, right? They're really worried about that. And women are also worried about that. So if you notice people's opinions change 180 degrees and 180 degrees back, it's because they're just normies. And as part of that social survival, they're trying to adopt whatever the consensus position is because that's what's necessary for social success where they're at, right? They don't want to become social outcasts. They don't want to deal with that. No one really wants to. It's just some people have a deeper level conviction. They're fanatics about their ideas, and so they are willing to suffer that, right? The other thing about normies is that their thoughts and their methods, kind of like this social survival mechanism thing, they're more heuristic and less theoretical. So they're not really willing to suffer for the theoretical idea that like you have body integrity and shouldn't have to take foreign substances into your body in order to have a job. Rather, they'll be like, I need my job, therefore I'm going to submit to whatever things have to be stuck into me in order to keep my job. And I'm going to support whatever the consensus is for that action to make sure that I can maintain my job. That's a survival mechanism. But when it comes to like them operating in the environment, they tend to just go for what works. It's like Roman versus Greek. Like Romans just do what works, and they don't worry about the theory that underlies it. They just do the things that works. And so they do the things that work for them, right? If it's buying clothes off Amazon, then they're going to do that. And they're not really going to think deeply about like theoretically how those clothes get to them. They're going to vote for policies that just directly have an effect that they want, and they're not going to think a little bit more deeply about the theory that underpins them. They're not worried about micro or macroeconomics. They're not worried about that kind of stuff when they're making decisions. They're just doing what works. And there's nothing bad about that. The truth is most of what we do is heuristic, right? It's directed towards like just models that seem to work, and we don't worry about why they work. And it's only in our areas of fanaticism or expertise that we start to worry about all of those fine little gradations about why things are the way they are. Normies are about the wide mouth of a market, not the long tail. The long tail is the fanatics, right? So the fanatics in the long tail don't like the normies because they eat the slop, right? They're into the corporate slop. Because the corporate slop's put in front of them, it's easy to consume, it's easy to buy, it's cheap to buy. That's what goes for normies. It's the wide mouth. So if you've heard me talk about the, let me do it from this, the wide mouth and the long tail, right? The wide mouth is the big corporate mainstream product that gets lots of people interested. The long tail is going to be the very niche things that are attached to that are higher value. So you could think of this in lots of ways, like sales funnels. There's all kinds of ways to think of a wide mouth and a long tail. But if you think of Star Wars, a Star Wars movie, that's the wide mouth. Everybody goes to see the Star Wars movie. people, as a result, become more interested in Star Wars, and then you have a long tail of people who buy like all the Star Wars Legos and read all the Star Wars books, and they're the fanatics of Star Wars. Okay, so the normies are in the fat mouth. They watch the movie, they like it, maybe they buy a Lego set for their kid, you know, they buy a little mini X-Wing or something. They're not the guys who buy the $700 Millennium Falcon, the $700 Walker. They're not the guys who set up the big dioramas for the Lego exhibits. They're not the guys who show off their toys at the toys exhibit. You know, they're not the toy collectors. They're not the guys who read all the novels, right? That's the long tail. So the fanatics, you know, and I know this from experience from talking to so many of you, and really I'm in the fanatic category when it comes to most things, and I guess Star Wars would be an example, right? Is that why are people buying this slop? And the answer is because they're not fanatics. They're normies. Star Wars trailer comes on. I know I've liked Star Wars because I've watched it in the past. If this one looks cool, I'll go watch it. That's as much as a normie really needs to think about. Okay. So they're the wide mouth of the market, not the long tail. They generally are on the lag side of various filters. What I mean by that is that, let's say there's a new style that comes into popularity. They are going to be the last ones on board. They're going to be the last ones to know about it. So they're on the lag side of any filter. So if a style gets big and then dies, normies may just be a blip to them. They may not even notice that it's there. Whereas fanatics tend to jump on those trains early and then tend to be excited about them. And when we talk about filters, like let's say we're looking at heavy metal or something like that, the normie listens to Metallica. He listens to maybe if he's a little bit more into metal, he might listen to Megadeth, right? But the normie listens to Metallica and he listens to like Linkin Park or something, or Korn. Okay, so that's like the lag side is like there's all these thrash bands and there's one that gets super popular at the end, and that's Metallica, and that's the one the normies listen to, and that's fine. That's on the lag side of the filter. All the stuff got filtered down to like the Black Album, and then that became the huge thing that everyone listened to. Okay. So they're on the lag side of any kind of filters for that. Time filters, economic filters, any of that kind of stuff. They're on the backside of that. They don't adopt early, they adopt late. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because the benefit of using a time filter is that that's already been decided for you. It's not hard to make the decision about what you want because the filter's already occurred for you. That's great, actually. It's very useful. They adopt what's already popular. That's a social filter, right? Goes back into that. So if something's already popular, that's the thing that they're going to adopt. They are not into Metallica in 1986. They're into Metallica in 1992. Okay, once it's already popular. And they stick with what they've liked in the past. So they tend to be a little bit sticky, and they tend to have a strong anchoring towards things that they've done in the past. And this is actually a good thing. We do it for lots of things, right? Is that Sony has made good products in the past. Therefore, if I'm looking to buy a new product in that same category, I have a general belief that Sony is going to continue to deliver similar quality. Right? Or whatever brand you want. That's the importance of brands. And it's why normies get a little bit attached to brands, not in a fanatic sense, but they can just, I like Adidas shoes because I bought a pair of Adidas shoes. They were really comfortable. They lasted a long time. Next time I buy shoes, that's going to be the first brand I look at. And the problem with this is that by sticking to what you like in the past, you can end up with kind of the Star Wars slot problem, which is that you have someone who will at least watch like the first episode of whatever series comes out for a long time. And then it takes a long time for them to just stop paying attention to Star Wars because they've liked it in the past. They remember liking it. So it becomes an easy association that they're going to like Star Wars because they've liked it in the past. Okay. Now, here's some good things about being normies. They do not view their whole identity as being part of a subculture. So they may like Metallica, but they're not going to be like, oh, I'm a metalhead and I have to have long hair and a wizard hat. Right. Well, now I'm getting into a certain subgenre of metal. Which subgenre of metal does this hat belong in? Should I be playing in Twilight Force or should I be playing in Sleep or some doom metal band? Because this feels doom metal to me, but people are like, no, that's a power metal hat. That's a power metal hat. But I'm like, I got the gray hair, we doom guys, we're gray haired guys these days, right? Okay. But yeah, so they're not into a subculture, right? They're just normal people that buy normal clothes. They don't have their personal identity associated with being a Star Wars fan. right? They may be like, oh, I'm going to be a little bit nerdy and watch Star Wars. I'm like, it's not really nerdy to watch the most popular franchise of all time behind Pokemon. It's not really nerdy to like Pokemon either because it's very popular. Okay, so that's just not their identity. Like the furthest identity they might have is like, I'm a little bit nerdy. It's like, how are you a little bit nerdy? It's like, I played Baldur's Gate. It's like, okay, great. That's cool. I'm glad that you can get into that, right? It's like, I read Lord of the Rings. Very nerdy. I like Harry Potter. Awesome. I'm so glad because Harry Potter's really good, but they're not associated with a subculture, right? They don't cosplay Harry Potter and go to Harry Potter conventions. They just read Harry Potter books and liked them. That's a normal way of approaching things. So their identity is not bound up in that stuff. And that's good. That's a good thing, right? The problem with having your identity bound up in a subculture is that it replaces other parts of your identity that should be more authentic, right? Like your religion, your family, your national identity, your ethnic identity, things like that. So that's good. It's actually pretty good that normies don't do that. It's a good thing. We should be more normie-like in that sense. They'll consume whatever's easily available, so they have a convenience bias. So, like I said, the reason Marvel basically went bankrupt is they stopped selling things in a convenient way to normies. The normies didn't see the books, they didn't buy them. They're not going to a comic book store to buy things that were a convenience buy. Just like, oh, I'll buy this book and maybe it'll tell me an adventure for my kid and it'll be fun, and that'll be it. If the game has to be sought out in some weird place, they're not going to play it. So putting D&D on the shelf at Target, and I did a video about this years ago. I'm like, this is huge. Like, this is a really good thing. This is good people to play Dungeons and Dragons because it's on the shelf at Target. It can impulse buy it for $25. Like, that's great. That'll get a lot of people into the hobby. And I think that was probably a good move by Hasbro. It's a convenience buy. So whatever the convenience buys is, whatever's convenient to buy, that's what they go for. That's why normies buy a lot of stuff from Amazon. It's because it's convenient to buy it. Buy it at Target, buy it at Walmart, the normie places. They're not going to like the specialist drink shop to get some kind of special scotch, right? They just, we'll get, like normies drink Crown Royal and they drink Jim Beam. Why do they drink Jim Beam and Crown Royal? Why? Because they're at the store and they can pick them up and put them in their car and they can buy them. That's why. Yeah, they're not buying some Lefroy 20-year scotch, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? And they like the Crown Royal and they think it's good, and they like the Jim Beam and they think it's good, and that's fine. They're good for what they are, I guess. But I don't know anyone who's like a whiskey fanatic that's like, yeah, we should drink blended Jim Beam. I guess it's okay. Like, it's good for blended whiskey, right? It's like, let's get some Crown Royal, some Canadian blended whiskey. They're searching for like, this is some peaty thing made in an island off of Scotland, and the sheep pissed in it to give it some special notes of piss, and that's what's good about it, right? So I'm making fun a little bit, but if like you're a Scotch fanatic, you probably will say something like, oh yeah, this is what we really like, the single malt Scotch. Okay, so they're not looking for single malt Scotch. They're not looking for vintage wines. They're not looking for vintage guitars, right? They're looking for stuff that's easy to buy. I'm going to go to the guitar store and buy a guitar from the guitar store. Whereas like me, it's more like, I'm looking for a 1997 Parker Fly in emerald green. And when I see one, that's what I'm going to try to get. I got it, I got a Hello Kitty guitar. Okay. So that's it. They're the opposite of niche, right? They seek accessible experiences. They're the fat mouth, not the long tail. What's an accessible experience? Well, it would be going to a fun concert of music that they already like, right? They're the guys who would go to the AC/DC concert and the Guns N' Roses concert, Motley Crue concert, even though it's all mimed, they would go to it. Why? Because they already have heard a couple Motley Crue songs they like. It's an accessible experience. It's a concert. They would know the songs. They could sing along. They're not going to go maybe to like the High on Fire concert. They're not going to go see the Mayhem Abath concert. They're not going to that. That's too esoteric, and they won't know what to expect. They haven't heard the music. It's like, hey, do you want to come see this free jazz group? They'd be like, I don't even know what that is. Like, oh, you probably shouldn't. You probably won't like it. You probably won't like it. They're not the ones who look for like really hardcore math rock, right? They want easily accessible experiences. So that's the movies for a lot of normies. They go to the movies. The movies We can go to the movies anytime, and it's fun. Okay. They normalize things. So this is another one that I wrote down. They pull the pendulum back the other way. When things get extreme, normies are the ones who react to that by saying that's too extreme. And I think we see that in politics, and I think we see that in culture too, is that if it gets a little too extreme, they pull it back to wherever their anchors are. No. You've gone too far. Let's make it more like what I remember it being. And in a lot of cases, the market will respond to that, right? They'll make the product less woke. They will elect a different politician. They'll do all of these different things that pull things away from, the pendulum will swing back towards the center. And if it goes too far the other way, then they pull it back again because of their anchoring. So that's actually a good thing, right? They're kind of a buffer. They are the main occupier of the Overton window. If you don't know what the Overton window is, it's basically the acceptable kind of discourse in politics. And if you go outside that Overton window, you're an extremist and a danger to society, and you should be exiled and locked up. And you can only really talk about a range of issues that are within the Overton window, right? Like you can talk about, how much could we spend on welfare, but you may not be able to talk about like whether the Holocaust was real or something. And if you go, what? He's a Holocaust denier, throw him out, right? So you can't go that far. But you can maybe ask certain kinds of questions. I don't know, generally maybe in that direction. So the Overton window, those are the people who are in the Overton window, right? And what they view as extreme, that's generally what the Overton window is. So when we talk about pushing the Overton window to the left or to the right, what that really means is that normies are changing what kind of discourse they're willing to have and what kind of discourse they're not willing to have. Right. So they're not going to entertain certain kinds of discourse, and the Overton window widens. They're entertaining more, or moves in one direction to the right or to the left, means they're going to entertain more extreme arguments from that political side. And they're really the ones who determine society's course. Like the normative values are predominantly where society's going. There is some truth to the fact that if the normative values start to decay, that's also when society decays, right? If the normal thing to do is to not get married and have children, what do you have? You have a birth crisis, and you have a decline of society, and you have all kinds of problems from that. So whatever the normal values are, that determines a lot of society's direction. There is such a thing as like rule by the minority, the least tolerant wins. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actions that people do, how they express their values, whether they're having kids or they're not having kids, whether they're working or they're not working, and to what degree they're working, what kind of investments they're buying, whether they're avoiding one thing or another thing, where they're choosing to live. All those things really determine a lot of what society does. They're not the same as a bugman. So I talk about bugman a lot. A bugman is like a guy who is just a consumerist. That's it. Normies are not pure consumerists. They're not consume product, get excited for next product. They buy products as they're convenient, right? They buy a Nintendo Switch because they think their kid might like playing it. They don't get excited over the Nintendo Switch the way that the bugman does. If the Nintendo Switch is not on the shelf, they just don't buy one. They don't go scramble all over town to buy the Nintendo Switch when it comes out. They're like, oh, it's not, it looks like it's sold out. We'll just buy it later in the year. No big deal, right? Oh, PS5's not on the shelf. I guess I'm not buying a PS5. Okay, that's different from a bugman who's like collecting Funko Pops and stuff. Totally different thing. Do not confuse normies and bugmen. Normies do not collect Funko. They might buy a Funko Pop of like, I bought a Gene Simmons Funko Pop because I liked a Kiss song, and they put it on their shelf and it looks cool and they think it's cute, and that's great. They buy like something like that. That's as far as their consumerism goes. They're not buying hordes of crap to put on their walls. That's a bugman thing. They're not the same as a midwit. A midwit is actually higher than average IQ. Normies would be kind of in the middle IQ. So a midwit is someone who's like a little bit above average IQ, but isn't smart enough to really know that they aren't smart, I guess. And they're not the same as an NPC, right? An NPC just has no thoughts of their own. Normies adopt the consensus, but they're not like just directly programmable by propaganda. In fact, the common man tends to be a little bit more immune because there's normies on the left and normies on the right. If you meet the normie on the right, he's gonna be like, of course I don't believe anything on CNN. Of course I don't believe anything in the newspapers. They're just propaganda rags, right? It's kind of the midwit meme, right? They can be low on the IQ side and therefore be immune to propaganda. I think C.S. Lewis had a quote about that in That Hideous Strength, which was like the well-read man is the easiest to manipulate, right? That's the midwit. It's the slightly above average kind of academic guy versus a super genius who's able to see all the patterns. Okay, so they're not the same as an NPC. They're not the same as a midwit. An NPC is someone who's just programmed, and their programming will just switch. Whereas a normie, it's a performative thing, whatever their opinions that they espouse are. Like, yes, I'm for whatever rights will allow me to keep my job, right? And normies are really important. That's the last point. They are super, super important. If you are not marketing to normies, your product is never going to have big sales. And I know this is the problem with a lot of artists, and I know there's a lot of artists that watch this channel, whether you're a writer or you're a musician or a comic book artist. We love the things that we are fanatics about. We're fanatics about our niche, however you want to say it. We're fanatics. And so the tendency is I want to make things like what I'm a fanatic about, right? I want to make a death metal album. Cool. You're probably not going to make money doing that, okay? You're not going to sell 1 million copies of a death metal album. It's just very unlikely. If you make something that's really normie directed, it's very competitive though, right? So sometimes when you're deciding to make your art, you want to go for the niche, or you want to go for what's more mainstream. But if the normies aren't buying a thing, that thing tends to go away. Whether it's a style like jazz, normies stopped listening to jazz. Jazz became dead, right? It died. When normies stopped buying rock music, people talk about the death of rock. It's because normal people are stopping listening to rock. And if that's what happens, then that style goes away. The fanatics can keep it alive. They can preserve it, but it won't ever be something that matters anymore. You'll find that whatever kind of big popular trend can get going, those normies who are like the last ones on board, they're what makes it permanent. They're what makes it last a long time. Whether it's something like 50 Shades of Grey or it's something like Harry Potter. Most people who read Harry Potter, and I'm including myself in this, they didn't read until like 4 or 5 of the books were out, until the movies were coming out. Once the movies came out, then they were interested in the books. I read them before the movies came out because my sister was into them. I think after the 3rd or 4th book came out, I read them. And turned out they were really good. And I was like, this isn't just like children's literature. It's like really good children's literature. She did a really good job of this. But yeah, the normies are the ones who, like, I knew them, right? The Harry Potter movies came out and they're like, now I'm reading the books. I'm like, that's great. I think you'll enjoy them. And I'm glad that movie got you excited to read the book. So they're kind of like the people who respond to the trend by then getting in, going deeper into it. The Game of Thrones is on HBO, so they read Game of Thrones. There's nothing wrong with that. That's like a normal way. It's like, wait, I like this. Let me go deeper. Let me see if I like what's deeper. And this is how fanatics actually are born. We're normies about one thing. Then we go deeper and deeper and deeper until we become a fanatic. I know that's how I got into heavy metal, right? What was the first metal band I listened to? It was Metallica. They excited me. They interested me. Oh, there's some other thrash bands that are good. There's Megadeth. I'll listen to. And then you go deeper into the back catalog. Oh, their old stuff is really good. Megadeth's old stuff is really fast. Oh, what's Slayer? Man, they are crazy, right? And then you get deeper, and it's like, I'm going to listen to Death. I'm going to listen to Death. I'm going to listen to Cannibal Corpse. I'm going to listen to, and then you get into crazier styles. I'm going to listen to Mayhem, and I'm going to listen to Immortal, until you're a fanatic, right? Until your focus is on the things that are more obscure, that are deeper, that are harder to understand, and that aren't normie friendly. So that's fine. It's fine that normies watch Harry Potter and then get deeper into Harry Potter. That could be a nascent fantasy reader. And if you like fantasy, if you're a nascent fantasy reader, boy, you got to check out King Leper. It is, I got a crowdfund for it. You can get a hardback, or you can just buy the ebook. Hopefully by the time you watch this, there's still a couple of the signed copies available. But yeah, check that out. That's about all I have to say about normies. I wanted to make a long video on normies. I love normies. Normies are important, right? Normies are all around us. Don't resent them, understand them, and don't judge them too harshly, because most of the things normies do are appropriate behaviors. They're normal and appropriate behaviors. And just because not everyone can be a staunch ideologue does not mean that they are bad. In fact, what you really need sometimes is you need some people to be really firm about their ideas and their ideologies. And that encourages normies to kind of fall in line with you, right? They're the deltas. They get in line and they start doing what other people are doing. So you can be the trendsetter if you're not a normie. That's great. Encourage people, get them to, hey, oh, you liked Harry Potter? Oh man, have you ever heard of Earthsea? Oh, okay, you can read that. After you read that, now you can get into some real fantasy. Now you can read like this. You can read some Michael Moorcock over here. You can read some Poul Anderson. You can read some, I don't know. Think of whoever you want. I don't know who goes deeper than that. Like what's some like more obscure, like what's some more esoteric fantasy than that? I don't know. Glenn Cook, right? Hey, you start getting him into other stuff. Oh, you like Game of Thrones? Oh, you should read Glenn Cook. You got to read Glenn Cook. That's where it started. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to go deeper. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I really like this stuff. Oh, well, let me show you this stuff, right? So yes, you can pull normies into that fanatic area, and they in turn can get other people excited about music or fantasy literature or whatever it is, right? So just, I don't know. You can be the leader. That's all I have to say. Normies are great, and they'll keep you centered, right? I'll give you an example. I should have led with this, but if you stuck around to the end of the video, I'm gonna give you examples. Like on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, there was an official. I'm gonna find it here. I can't believe it's real. I can't believe it's real. But they did it. Here it is. I'm going to show it to you. Hold on. Let me get this right here. All right, here it is. Here it is. Okay, here it is. Rearm Europe. Now, I showed this to my wife. She's a normie. She's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. What's the problem here? And I'm like, you don't see it? You don't see it? You don't see it? Okay. If you are on 4chan, if you're deep on the internet, if you're a weirdo, if you're not a normie, you look at this and you're like, I can't believe somebody made this and it's been put out by an official channel. I just don't believe it. This can't be real. It could have been a joke made by someone who wasn't a normie, or it could have been made by a normie with no idea about what this would look like or what this would refer to and what very famous, not really goat themed, but the word goat is in there, what that's going to refer to. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. Have a great one. Check out the Kickstarter down below, and I'll talk to you later.